Everyone. I think we'll get started. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining this webinar on productivity. Firstly, my name is Jamie Phillips, and I am the Marketing, Communications and Membership Manager for NECA SA/NT. My colleague, Mara Newman, is also on this webinar, and she is the Events and Marketing Coordinator at NECA Victoria. Thank you so much for joining and taking time out of your busy schedules for this webinar. We'll be discussing strategies to boost productivity and efficiency. I would now like to introduce the star of the show, Ray Hodge. Ray is a business consultant and advisor with extensive experience in streamlining workflows and strategies, leadership development and coaching. His expertise predominantly focuses on the construction industry, particularly in electrical, making him the perfect person to lead this webinar. Before I hand over to Ray, we'll do some quick housekeeping. I would ask you all to mute yourselves if you're not already. And Ray has also requested that everyone have some pen and paper handy, so perhaps just grab that before we kick things off. Finally, if you've got any questions throughout, there'll be plenty of time for them. If you could just pop them in the chat function, that would be fantastic. I will now hand over to Ray.
Thanks, Jamie, and thank you to everybody who's attending at the moment. This is a little bit of a weird setup for me because I often do live training and webinars where I can actually see people. So for me to see myself is a little bit disconcerting. It'll only be for the first 60 seconds or so until I get used to it. But thank you so much for attending. The reason for the pen and paper that's really important, by the way, that Jamie mentioned, is one of the things I do is when I teach, I like people to actually engage in the writing process. And there's one area in particular that I'd like you to draw. So if you can get pen and paper as we go, that would be great. So as Jamie mentioned, I've been consulting, coaching to the trades pretty much for 15 years. I do a lot of process, workflow efficiencies, strategy planning work, and then a lot of my work these days is coaching leaders and pretty much everyone right across the board in the areas of productivity and time management, and also being effective in team leadership. And obviously today is about ruthless productivity in the time management space. I learnt this firsthand. I used to run a finance business for about 10 years. I was working 80-hour weeks. Work-life balance wasn't even a thing I understood. It was just work, work, and more work. And I had some pretty hard lessons in the early days. And so what I'll be sharing today comes out of my own personal journey, and then the coaching and training of people in the workplace for the last 15 years. And the things I'm sharing today is really from what I've seen work on the ground. It's not theoretical. I've seen it applied and work, and in all job roles that I've worked in, right across from administration, assistants and managers, right the way through to senior executives and much in between that. And the feedback I've received from the training and the coaching, these are the areas that I'll share today. Oftentimes I'm coaching people for 3 to 6 months in that just the thing of time management, and to get their lives back in work-life balance and get rid of stress, and also the training. And so these are the things that have been fed back as being really foundational in the process. Also, just to say up front is that I reference that I've worked with admin right the way through to seniors. And I'd like to just share some of the gains that people have won in the different areas. So an estimator I recently worked with was working till 6:30 of the night. Over a period of 3 weeks, got him back to 4:30 p.m, leaving work and walking with his partner at the end of the day. Construction manager, 20 to 30% saved each week that went back into high value tasks. A project manager I worked with who did one of the major AFL football club rebuilds. He didn't so much get time back, but the stress alleviation was actually visible over the time I worked with him. PMs, project managers, I've had numbers of those who have got 5 to 8 hours a week back. A business owner I worked with who was working 80 hours a week, I understood that. After 5 weeks, got him back, got him down to, what was it, 80, 65 hours a week, still a massive week, but he got to go to the gym and see his family. A divisional manager, applying what we're going to be doing today, took his unread emails from 400 when I first met him over 4 weeks down to 14 emails consistently. Admin, I've been working with an admin assistant the last couple of weeks, delightful person. And she said, you know, it's funny. She said, I've had more energy and I'm not as mentally drained. And the last one was that I want to mention was a scheduler, service coordinator. They're probably one of the trickiest roles in a business, both to recruit for and in this whole thing of managing time. But the business owner phoned me initially and said, I've got too many pissed off customers phoning me asking, where are you? Could you please help him manage his time and the calls? And over 3 months, reduced all of those to pretty much zero. And he also reported that he had a more harmonious work life with increased energy, and he didn't have to sleep during the days on weekends. And so one of the reasons for this webinar today, and this is because I'm a bit of a slow learner, is I've been doing this for years, and it's only the last few months I've just realized that these people, their lives are being transformed with some of this stuff that I'm coaching them in. So thus I thought, because I love the whole trades and construction area, I thought I'd run it through with NECA. So with that said, the other thing too is if you've got, and Jamie referenced this, if you've got questions along the way, please just send them through on the chat, and I've got that open here. And I will also pause for questions at the end of every section. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. I love this slide. And whether your office looks like that or whether you feel that on the inside, I've certainly felt that on the inside. This is the, you know, the opposite of productivity. It's funny, when I was preparing for this webinar, I remember a client I was working with who had an office similar to this, and I spent about 15 to 20 seconds figuring out where to put his cup of coffee. It was a disaster. But a lot of our worlds just feel very unordered. And I'd like in this first section to move to a whole energy, the whole thing of energy. So I'm just having to juggle a couple of things here. So in my work over the 25 years, particularly in time management, I've realized that one of the areas that's missing in the time management conversation is the whole thing of working according to our energy. If you're involved in estimating, for example, you may have found at different times you're trying to do pricing and maybe design in low energy times, and it can take you twice as long and create twice as many errors. That's one example. And so one of the key things here, and I'd like you to draw this as I'm talking with you and just talking through it. If you can draw the vertical axis, low to high with the energy, and then the horizontal axis, the time. So you might have heard the mantra, do the hardest things first. Well, I think that's a little bit misdirected. I think it should be do the hardest things first when your energy is the highest or rising. Because if you do the hardest thing first, and like this energy wave, you're trying to do the hardest thing first at 7 a.m. It's really counterproductive, and again, twice as long, twice as many mistakes. And so, what I'd like you to do is draw your energy wave. It may be similar to that. Everyone's is different. I've done this for many people. And if you're a morning person, it's going to be very different to the night owls among you. So just take a moment to draw that. And again, if you've got questions on any of these, feel free to shoot them through. Shame I didn't have some music to play in the background. You can create that for yourself. And again, it doesn't have to be right, wrong, or perfect. Just approximately where you think those rises and falls happen. All right. This is the next area. Hey, Jamie, I was just going to say, Jamie, could you just send me through a chat message just to make sure the thing's working? It did yesterday. I just want to make sure it's working my end. Yes, got it. Thank you. All right. So this is the next section I'd like you to do. If you can draw this, draw a couple of columns. I'd like you to write down on the left-hand side your high concentration tasks. So I've got a couple of examples there. Quoting, client meetings, data follow-up. Sometimes that needs high energy. That can be a bit tricky if you're involved in that. Tasks involving the chances of injury. You need to have high concentration when you're doing those. And then the low concentration tasks. Email review, filing, general admin, yada, yada. So if you just write down 3 or 4, 5 in each of those areas. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. It's very difficult because I can't see when I'm doing this live, or I can see if people are finished or not. But anyway, I'll keep moving for the sake of time. The next thing I would like you to do is take those high concentration tasks and match them to where your energy is on the rise, where it's higher. And then do the same for the low concentration tasks. So you'll see in this example, we've got a team meeting. Manager needs to be pretty switched on for that, and client meetings. And again, don't so much worry about the time where they fit. It's just getting an understanding of this. And then I've put the email and general admin where energy's lower. And the reason is, and I'm not sure I mentioned this, why this is important, is that sometimes we tend to treat all tasks as equal. But when we actually can match them with the rise and falls of our energy, we start to really drive productivity. And you would know as well as I do, if you're focused and 100% concentrating, you can move through things and be incredibly efficient. But as I said before, you try and do that in the low energy, low concentration times, and it takes quite a long time. All right, so any questions on this before we move on? So that's the foundation that we've covered off on. No? All right. It's pretty simple, but again, it's really foundational to the whole process. So we're going to move into the whole thing of creating a default calendar. And again, I've done this with people in all job roles, and I've had a lot of frequently stated objections, FSOs, of why it can't work. So you're allowed to post those on here in your situation as well. And sometimes it takes a while to work through, but feel free to put any challenges you've got in your own world with this. But Thomas Mitchell, in his book Essays of Life, says it's wonderful how much work can be got through in a day if we go by the rule, map out our time, divide it off, and take up one thing regularly after another. Now, I've read a lot of research that really demonstrates that multitasking is actually the most unproductive way that we can work. And one of the things I've seen, and it can't always happen in every job role. Again, I go back to scheduler, service coordinator. You guys are just dealing with things all through the day and a mix. But again, I've still done some of these principles with schedulers. But the principle here is the more that we can go by the rule, mapping out our time, dividing it off, and taking up one thing regularly after another is the most efficient and productive way we can work. And what I'd like to do now is move into the calendar. And again, I've done this right across the board. So this is really about having the ideal flow to the day. And I so wish I could see your faces. The ideal flow to the day, because I've had a lot of people, they're like, oh no, I can't do this. One of the metaphors I use is that if I'm in Melbourne, if I was to go to Cairns tomorrow, I would take some time to get out, Google Maps, put in the destination, and then figure out the stops along the way, the milestones along the way. Because if I headed out my driveway now without planning it, goodness knows where I'd end up, potentially Perth. And so it's important just to, and this is and again, it's a metaphor for planning our day. It's much better to have a sense of the destination and how we're going to flow through the day, because as in with Google Maps, if I get off track toward my destination for some reason, I see a coffee shop I want to stop, or a road reroute, the map always directs us back to the route. And that's essentially what the whole process of planning and having an ideal day does for us. And so you can see this is an estimator. This comes out of my latest book, How Efficiency Changes the Game. I'll be sending you the complimentary chapter on what we're covering today. And so this is just an example of his ideal work week. And now this guy, I've pegged him with high energy in the morning. You can see where those estimating blocks are. And then the afternoons is more site visits and client meetings. The red line through the day is that it's a dividing line. So the mornings are given to estimating, afternoons largely client meetings. Now I've worked with 3 people in this that I can think of PMs, two PMs, and a business owner who was doing a lot of quoting for a shade sale construction company. And what we did was we divided the day. Mornings were for on-site meetings, and then the afternoon was for administration. When I first started working with them, all three were just on-site office, on-site office. There was no flow to the day, no dividing line. And so one of those PMs, we got a full day back, and the company gave him another massive job to run and oversee on that day. And another guy stopped working nights just from mapping out the ideal flow of the day, putting that dividing line, and having the blocks of time for focus. And you'll notice that the white space just gives flex to the day. So the key here is that, again, it's just that flow and the ideal day. So what I'd like to, I'll go to the next one. So once we've got the ideal mapped out, and so for me, I've got a default calendar in Google. I use Google, and it just sits there. And then I've got an active calendar. And so I've mapped out the ideal. Sometimes I actually print it and leave it on my desk just to remind me of where I'm going and what I'm doing. And then this is the active. So essentially it's taking Tuesday from the estimator, and he's got down what he's going to do. Complete the ACME estimate, Smith & Co. review request, yada, yada, finish the stats report. That's an addition. And then the site visits. And so a lot of people that I've worked with, and this is why I often say there's no right way to do this, but there is our way. And so when I've been working with people over that period of 3 to 6 months, it's just been adapting it to their job role or the interruptive activity or the responsibilities they have. But it's the principle of having the ideal day and then using that as a template to actually map the process of the current day into an active diary. So what I'd like to get you to do is I'd like you to do this on a piece of paper, and just as an exercise. So you can choose the day. It might be tomorrow. Just keeping in mind where your energy rises and falls, and your key responsibilities. And again, just put some of the things in around those high concentration tasks, low concentration tasks, just as an exercise, just to be able to take with you. Oh, that's cool. Just while you guys are doing that, I just saw Bianca's just come through, who I worked with for 8 years. That's cool. I'm assuming everyone can see that. Gone from working 80 hours and having no work-life balance. Oh my God, she didn't at all. To having much more time and being clearer. Thank you, Bianca. Appreciate that. I remember the self-sabotage as well. It's very cool. Don't know if you can tell, but I love my work and I love my clients. Thank you. All right, I'll just give you another minute on that. Am I going too fast, Jamie? Or if good. Okay, so it's pacing along. Now, just to mention here, you'll see the plan tomorrow. I'll come back to that a little bit later, but it's one of the key things I put into everyone's default diary when we're working, is just having that time at the end of the day to plan. All right, I'm going to move on. Hopefully, well, it sounds like it's pacing okay. I'm going to talk about to-do lists. So pretty much everyone I meet and work with uses to-do lists. I no longer use them because I use my actual active diary to put my tasks into. I learned that a long time ago. It was much more conducive because I just use my calendar all the time. So I've got all my to-dos and I'm constantly managing my diary and where I'm going to do them. And I'll reference that a little bit later too. But if you use to-do lists, and I assume probably most of you do, this is what I find when I start working with somebody. It's generally unordered, and a list is better than no list. My question when I start coaching people is, tell me about how you start the day. Do you go into the day well planned, or do you jump out of bed and run in the general direction? And the majority of people, I work with some very honest people, like the anchor there, they will say, I tend to jump out of bed and run in the general direction. A list is better than no list. Now, some people I've had, they say, well, it's just all in my head. The trouble is with keeping it in your head, it's like a sugar bowl. As soon as it fills up and you keep going, it spills everywhere. And so a list is better than no list. But this is an unordered list. And what I recommend, and this has been one of the things, and common feedback I've got has been one of the very helpful things from this training side of things, is a prioritized list that's ordered. So in this situation, we've got the priorities A, B, and C. And then the numbers indicate the flow in which people are going to work through. So A1, when the person gets to the office, they are going to do complete and submit tender to Northern Star. Once that's finished, they then go to A2, write the report for ACME. Once the A's are done, B's follow suit. And then C's, I often say that the C's really are those things that, you know, ideally get them to them today, but oftentimes they can be delegated to others or deleted completely. Often when I used to use the to-do list, the C would stay there for months and then I'd just delete it. It was no longer relevant. So what I'd like, just one thing here, two things. One is that having a prioritized to-do list in this manner helps prevent procrastination on the harder tasks. So, for example, if this wasn't prioritized, I get to the office and I see submit the tender, and I know it's due by 5 o'clock, and I thought, now I'll do it a little bit later after lunch. And then interruptions come in and we get waylaid, and then it just really, you know, we end up being highly stressed and often, you know, having to ask for an extension. So it really helps stop that procrastination. The other thing I've had feedback from some of the people I've worked with is that they like to do some easy tasks first to start the day off, and those can be pre-planned in advance as well. I remember one woman saying, I like to do some easy things because it gives me a sense of achievement and momentum first up before I get to the more difficult areas. You can also use this prioritization with your default calendar as well. So if your submission of tender to Northern Star, I've had some people do it in categories. It's a bit involved to go through here now, But if you've got, for example, estimating as one of your main tasks, and you've got client follow-ups, quote follow-ups, for example, as your second, you can actually categorize those on the to-do list and then do the same prioritization and flow. So you might have 3 or 4 columns, bit more involved, but again, having it all pre-planned, it just means that when you hit the office, you're aware of your energy, everything is mapped out for the day, then it's much more productive. So what I'd like you to do is take a minute to write down 5 or 6 tasks you've got to do tomorrow. Just write those down and then put the A, B's and C's beside them and number them if you can. And any questions on any of this while you're doing that exercise? Okay. I'm going to move across into the importance of the whole area of planning. So essentially, that's what we've been doing, especially with the default active calendar and the to-do list side of things. And that's all involved in planning our days and our weeks and how we're going to go about things. So Brian Tracy, consultant, author, speaker from the US. You may have heard of him, read some of his material, heard some of it. Says the good news is that every minute spent in planning saves as many as 10 minutes in execution. It takes only about 10 to 12 minutes for you to plan out your day, but this small investment of time will save you up to 2 hours of wasted time and diffused effort through the day. Now, I've never seen this validated by empirical research, evidence-based science in this, but I've seen it validated with the people I've worked with. And that 2 hours a day, that's 10 hours a week. So this is where the whole process of planning and what we're talking about becomes critical, foundational to everything, to company profitability and our headspace and work-life balance and less stress and so on. So I'd like to just share a couple of things. I'm going to just stop sharing the screen for a minute. One of my observations over the years of doing this is that most people I meet, as I mentioned before, get up and run in the general direction. And planning and what we're talking about here are learned behaviors. It's not because I have a personality of spontaneity. It might be I'm extrovert, and I don't like being locked into things. I remember one client who I was working with. I won't say their name. Let's call her Mary. Um, we were working on structuring the workday, and about a month into it, a month or two into it, she says, "I don't like this. This isn't working for me." And I said, "Why not? What's the problem?" Because we had done the default diary and doing this. She says, "You've taken all the fun out of going to work. You've taken fun out of the day," because she was a spontaneous type of person and loved working spontaneously. So then we had to take the principles and then adjust it for it to become her way. And that worked. And that's why I say, there's no right way, it's our way. But these things are behavioral and can be achieved over time with small steps. And I always say to people, if you do one change today, one change this week, maintain it, do another change next week, maintain it. Over the course of a year, you've done 52 changes, and that all mounts up. And the other thing too that's worth mentioning is if something doesn't immediately work, it doesn't mean it's not going to work. Sometimes it's just persevering with it rather than throwing it out and thinking, this is a whole lot of crap. So planning is the baseline. I found that if we don't set our agenda, we will run to other people's agendas. If we don't have a plan, other people have a plan for us. And I alluded to this one earlier, the importance of planning tomorrow, today, plan next week, this week. And so at the end of every day when I'm working with people, and it doesn't matter whether it's at the end of the day, 3 p.m., or it can be 7 a.m. In advance of the day to come. But the thing is that when we get to work, we know exactly what we're going to do and the direction we're headed. Now, I've had a lot of people say, this is a common one, people say, well, it's no point me planning because I walk through the office door and the day turns to shit. And that's true. And that is life. But I have found, and I've often said, like the metaphor with cans, if we've got a direction to go, when we do come off track, we know where to come back to. And often the day going to shit on a regular basis, one of the things I've found, and I'll reference this shortly, is that there is often a rhythm to our days, even if it's interruptive activity, that is consistent. And I'll show you, if we have time, I'll show you a time analysis slide I've done for a person. I've done time analysis for numerous people. And what we find is there's often a rhythm to those interrupted days. A thing I've learned over time is that the busier I get, the more frequently I need to plan. I work with some, like the guy I referenced before, 80-hour weeks. Interestingly, he was also in the electrical technology related business. And I would often, with him and others in those situations, is that, every hour or so, just to step back, calm the farm, look at the next hour, set what needs to be done, and then move through it as methodically as you can. The race car driver, Formula One driver, Jackie Stewart, he said there was a day when they were out on the tracks, he and a colleague were well ahead of the race, and the pit manager phoned and said, boys, we've got this race one. Just slow it down, ease off the cars, and bring them in. We've nailed this. He said, Jackie Stewart said, it was interesting. He said, the more we eased off, the faster our laps became. the faster the cars went. And this is a principle I use for myself and people I work with. Is just if you find you're out on that stress edge and constantly, and oftentimes as things speed up, we try and speed up with it. It's counterintuitive, but just to step back. And oftentimes productivity and outputs can be far greater than if we're working under stress all the time. The last thing to say with this, look, two things here on planning is often the source of our interruptions is for our failure to plan. One example, I was coaching a supervisor in a civil construction business. And his days would go from 7 till 4, he'd jump in the car, he'd have guys calling him, finding out where he was meant to be, they were meant to be the next day. It was having to order materials and phone guys. Did that on the way home. He'd have dinner, sit down and plan the next day at home, and really struggled to sleep and suffered with high anxiety. So I had him stop at 3 p.m. every day and plan the next day. Go up to his ute, sit down, plan the next day, order the materials, come back and tell the boys where they were going to be. 4 o'clock comes, he drives home, minimal, if no interruptions. He's done everything. Anxiety over the weeks I worked with him dropped. He slept better and his wife was happier. So it was a win all round. And that interruptive activity and stress and anxiety and everything else really came back to the lack of planning. The last thing to do, and this deals with some of the work-life balance side of things, is I was working with a electrical company, the owner of a company in Perth, and at the start of my project with them, I asked the wife. I said, is there any objectives things you'd like to get out of our work together? She says, I'd like my husband to be home more. She says, he's home physically overnight, but mentally and emotionally, he's absent. You've possibly heard that from others about yourself. I know I have. And anyway, we devised this little thing that falls into the planning side of called closing the door on the day. So 30 minutes before he was to leave the office, he was to review everything he had done for the day, just write it down, cross it off his to-do list. Then he'd plan the next day. Once he had done that, review it all, reflect on it, he'd get up from his chair and walk out of his office and physically close the door. Now, I know people are in open offices and you don't always have a door, but it's trying to do something mentally and emotionally just to close things off, and then physically to help you get that separation. Some clients I've worked with, especially in the early days of getting to more effective planning, we've had put a notepad beside their bed, so as things roll through their brains and keep them awake at night, they can write them down. One other guy I know here in Melbourne, a very large company, he uses a lamppost on the way home to switch off. So he does his reflection from the drive to the office on his way home. And once he, I was going to say hits the lamppost, once he, passes the lamppost, that's his switch off time. And then he focuses on his home life and being present at home. Any questions on that? You're very quiet today on questions. I'm glad I can see, I just can't see people's faces, but anyway, feel free to send anything through. The work-life balance thing is a challenge. I should say one thing on work-life balance before I just hit a couple of other things before we close this off, is a lot of people say the misconception with work-life balance is, or it's partially true, is having a dividing line between work and home. I think that's partially true. However, I think balance has got much more to do with energy in the two domains, because I can have a great dividing line between work and home. If I love my work and I go home to a miserable home life, I'm still unbalanced. If I have a great home life, and I get a lot of energy from it and inspiration, and I go to a job that sucks, I'm out of balance. And I think the goal for work-life balance for all of us is to seek to have energy, to have jobs, particularly tasks that we really enjoy. Obviously, all of us have got to do, the shit that comes with the job at different times. But as long as there's components of our work that inspire us, engage us, that are meaningful to us, and then when it comes to home life, personal world outside of the office, we've got activities that inspire us and give us energy. Two other things quickly is the one area I'd like just to touch on is the whole concept of batching and blocking. So batching and blocking is the concept of batching similar tasks into blocks of time. So case in point, I'm working with another electrical company in Perth. I phoned the client about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. I said, how's your day going? She says, oh my God, she says, I'm so stressed. I've got to get this quote in by 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon, and I'm so far behind. I said, what happened? She said, well, I was working on it, and then the mail came in. And I opened the mail, and there was a Telstra bill. I opened that, and there was an error on my phone bill. I've just spent an hour on the phone with Telstra. And I said to her, did you actually have to do it today? No, but, and so this was a case of, and I wrapped this back into the diary use. That, for example, that block of estimating time in the default calendar, any task that comes through that relates to estimating can be batched into that block of time. In my example, and which is similar to the example I just gave, I have admin for an hour a week. I hate admin. Can't stand it. It's the worst. That's one of my shitty jobs I have to do. But I save up anything I can for that 1 hour, and then I'm solely focused on the similar tasks in a block of time and fly through them. I try not to do things piecemeal wherever possible. So the concept again is just batching similar tasks into blocks of time. I'm just going to show you, I'm just conscious of time here. I'm just going to share one thing here. All right, time analysis. I referenced this earlier. This is, I'll send you the link for this in the email that Mara sends out tomorrow. It's available on my website. This serves a whole lot of different purposes, but it's really, it's pain in the ass to actually do the exercise, but it will give you more insight than probably anything else as to where your time goes, how you use it, and where the interruptions, the source of interruptions are coming. And it's all done in 15-minute increments. And when you do this for 1 or 2 weeks, it can be quite insightful. I'll show you one example. This was with the business development manager in a plumbing company. And this is just an example. Scratchy as it, the entries of what he does, it doesn't matter, but it's the principle. He would just write down what he did every day. And one of the issues for him is that he received so many calls. And so what we did, we put the time that they come in and then color coded them. And you'll see through to here, really around that 1 o'clock. Now, it may have gone on after that, but the density was in the mornings. And that's where I mentioned about there are a rhythm to the days with interruptions. What we did from this insight was we were able to reroute those calls, and we said, well, you know, there's some from site staff and material equipment and technical. And so we allocated a couple of guys on site. It was a pretty large company, and we communicated to the guys that they would start calling them. We identified through this process 50% of his time was being wasted just with calls that could have gone to other people. And so that can be quite a powerful little exercise for you to do. As I say, it's a pain to do, but well worth it. Last thing I'd like to share is the whole concept of scheduling interruptions. And this is, again, counterintuitive. When I ran my finance business, I found I had to block out the mornings to focus on doing the home. I was doing home loans, and a home loan business, it's probably not as reactive as a electrical maintenance business, but there's a lot of stuff you have to deal with that's urgent. And so what I would do was I would focus on doing the home loans and the writing of them, and give my phone to my assistant. And she was instructed that if anyone called and it wasn't urgent, that I would call the person back between 12 and 1 p.m. One thing I've learned is that oftentimes calls can wait 3 to 4 hours. The urgent ones, when the house is burning down, obviously you've got to take those. But what one person deems as urgent isn't necessarily so. And then what we would do, instead of her yelling out saying, "Hey, Ray, can you do this?" or "What happened with this?" I would work for an hour and meet with her for 15 minutes. Work for an hour, meet with her for 15 minutes. And that's how we spent the mornings and the week. I scheduled all of the potential interruptions. Did it always work? No, because in some cases the house was burning down and people needed me, and I had interruptions come. But largely I took control of that. I've worked with a lot of construction managers, particularly construction managers, PMs. It's more construction manager level, where people from on the field and their managers would often call, case in point, would just often call any time of the day just to talk through things. So we've scheduled 1 hour blocks every day that's the time to call to run things past. If it's urgent, different story, they can call anytime. But again, it's been really scheduling that interruptive period. And last example on this, if you run a business and you've got managers or team members that are often, putting their head. I had a client in HVAC, 6 managers, they'd often stop by, knock on the door. "Hey, you got a minute? Just need to run this past you." What we did was we set up 30-minute meetings once a week with each of them, and that was their time. And he said, "Look, this is your time. I'd like you to just keep anything that's not urgent, and we can talk through that." It saved him a hell of a lot of time and a hell of a lot of interruptions just from thinking through. And that time analysis will give you the insights there. All right, 426. I'm a big believer in finishing on time. Are there any further questions? I'm going to stay around after this for 15 minutes if any of you want to use the chat function to finish, ask any other questions. But any other further questions or comments here before I close off? No, it doesn't look like it. Well, I'm very grateful to have been able to do this. Very grateful to
Okay.
NECA.
There's one in the Q&A box. I'll read it out to you.
Yeah.
Could you please share some tips on how to manage longer or more complex tasks that might not easily fit into a single block, especially without creating unnecessary stress or disrupting work in other blocks?
Just let me have a look. Yeah, that involves planning. So when you're working with larger projects and it spans. I'm working with an administration person on this at the moment that involves a lot of policy and procedures, and we're just getting into the process now of starting to plan that. So it's and I know for example, when I'm writing a book, that's quite a complex task. I've written 3 of the things on my 4th. It's really about real, planning in advance, breaking it down, chunking it down. Because I agree. Yes, some of the jobs, and some of the large tenders that some of you guys do, they're very complex and take a long time. And I don't know if I've answered the question, but happy to chat next week too if you want to give me a call and talk through that. More than happy to do that. Didn't see that Q&A thing there. All right. Well, I will. So I just want to thank you. A couple of things, and I was going to say I've had a long association with NECA. Very grateful to them. I work pretty much nationally, and electricians everywhere, plus other trades. A couple of things. On November the 6th, I start an online course, Ruthless Productivity, that spans 3 months. It'll actually be 4, given the Christmas break, I think. And that's a training and coaching platform where a group of us, whoever can be part of that. And so Mara will send the link for that and tomorrow, and all of you are able to get 20% off the price of that course. And you'll just need to email me to mention that you're on this webinar. But that promises to, again, that course is designed to embed personally for you. You'll get the PowerPoint and the free chapter tomorrow. You'll also get a link to a free piece of writing I do that trades and constructions get it. I have a lot of people say that it's one of the only newsletters they read because they know it's going to be short. And as I said, you're welcome to have a complimentary session consult with me next week if you'd like to get in touch. I've got one last question. Actually, what I might do is I'll answer that after. I'll hand back to Jamie, and just because it's right on 4:30, and then I'll answer that in a moment.
Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. As Ray said, this will be available to you all tomorrow to watch, or to anyone else in your business who it might be available or beneficial to. Sorry. Thank you so much for joining, and have a lovely rest of your afternoon. And a huge thank you to Ray.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for looking after me. All right. So anybody leave that you need to, but I've got, I've just had someone say the newsletter is great. Thank you, Jeff. I've had someone say, when you have a business with lots of moving parts that change from 1 hour to the other, for example, the plan from one night changes by the next morning due to the change by client, sick staff, who do the job for the client. How do you suggest this is managed so the operations manager can switch off? That's tricky. So in some of these situations, and for example, if I'm working with a project manager who is on site and they have, everyday changes, every hour can change things. One of the things that we do is we just allow it to be what it is. And so it might be having a key things that they need to get done. For example, on the to-do list, they know what they've got to do. But it's essentially reactive time. And I've put this into default diaries where we say from 7 o'clock to 12 o'clock, that's essentially the rhythm of most days. We just allow it to be what it is. And then, at 1 o'clock, it might be a default entry for lunch. 2 o'clock might be checking of emails. And I know this is oversimplified, but again, it's really nuanced. A lot of these things, schedulers are a classic in this as well. So often with schedulers, it's the morning, it's a free float. Then after lunch, it might be then start as the phones die down, it might be locking in. But happy to have a chat to you, Mike, about that next week as well, if you want to have a further chat. And thanks for the about the newsletter as well. So not sure if that answered, but it's very tricky. And the switching off of an evening and during the day, it's really training people. If you're an OM and you've got people under you, just to manage that process as well. So you can tell from my answers, a lot of this is very nuanced to the people you've got and the situation, and then it's just really customizing that process. But yeah, moving parts can be a challenge. So, not sure if that answers your question, but again, more than happy to have a chat next week about it if you like. Anything else that or you're willing to you're welcome to add anything else to that, Mike, as well? And any other questions? Okay, all right, thanks for that. That'll do for now. It'd be nice if our work it could be very streamlined. I'm one of the more fortunate ones. My days with Zoom calls and meetings are very much pre-planned, but working in businesses like you guys and girls have, it's very tricky to sometimes lock down any set schedule. Anything else before we call it a day, a night? No. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate again, Jamie and Mara. And yeah, I hope you all enjoy your evening and have a very productive rest of the week. Thank you.